The dying man's blood was still warm on Sarah's hands when she realized the stranger she had just saved was about to destroy everything she had left in this world. But 12 hours earlier, as she stared at the eviction notice trembling in her fingers, she had no idea that choosing compassion over survival would lead to the most dangerous decision of her life. Sarah's heart was already broken. 3 months since her husband died in her arms because they couldn't afford the hospital bills. 3 sleepless nights since the landlord's final warning. 3 jobs that still weren't enough to keep her 2 teenage sons from becoming street children. She was counting her last 50 naira when the screams started. Desperate. Agonizing. Coming from the abandoned building where drug dealers and criminals hid their secrets. Every mother knows that sound. The sound of someone's child dying. Sarah's legs moved before her brain could stop them. Through the broken fence. Past the danger, keep out sign. Into the darkness where she found him. Blood everywhere. A young man, maybe her son's age, crushed under concrete blocks, his expensive clothes soaked red. His eyes were open, staring at her with the same look her husband had given her in those final moments. The look that begged, "Please don't let me die alone." Her hands shook as she checked for a pulse. Weak but there. Alive. Barely. That's when she saw the tire marks in the dust. Fresh ones. Leading right to where he lay. This was no accident. Someone had tried to kill this boy and left him here to die like a dog. The smart thing would have been to walk away. Call the police maybe. Let someone else deal with it. Someone who had money for medicine. Someone who didn't have hungry children waiting at home. Someone whose husband hadn't died because she couldn't afford to save him. But as she knelt there in the dirt, staring at this stranger's face, all she could see was her own son Michael. What if he was lying somewhere, broken and bleeding, while someone walked past because helping him was too dangerous? Too expensive? Too much trouble? The tears came without warning. For her husband. For her sons. For this dying boy whose mother was probably praying somewhere for a miracle. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her late husband's memory. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you. But maybe I can save him." Sarah dragged that stranger into her house with the last of her strength, knowing she had just spent her final hope on someone who might never wake up. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his story. She had no idea that the choice she was making would either destroy her family or save them all. But first, let me tell you about that night. The longest night of Sarah's life. The night everything changed forever. The small apartment felt even smaller with a stranger bleeding on her couch. Sarah's hands shook as she cleaned his wounds with the last bit of antiseptic she had been saving for her younger son David's scraped knee. Her 2 boys, Michael 17 and David 15, whispered nervously in the corner. "Mama, what if he dies here?" Michael asked, his voice cracking with worry. "What if the police think we hurt him?" Sarah paused, looking at the unconscious man whose wallet she had deliberately not searched. "Then we tell them the truth," she whispered back. "That we chose to save a life instead of walking away." But the truth was, Sarah was terrified. She had just spent her last money on medicine for this stranger. The money she needed for tomorrow's bus fare to work. The money that could have bought them dinner. Yet something deep inside her refused to let another human being die alone. The way her husband had died in that hospital bed while she was out working to pay the bills. Her neighbor, Mrs. Grace, had seen her carrying the man inside. "Sarah, are you crazy? You don't know this boy. He could be a kidnapper. A robber. What will people say about a widow bringing strange men into her house?" Sarah didn't answer. She just kept cooking the thin soup she had managed to make from the last onion and seasoning cubes in her kitchen. But Mrs. Grace's words echoed in her mind. What was she doing? What if she had just put her sons in danger? That night, as the man drifted in and out of consciousness, Sarah sat on the floor beside him, watching his chest rise and fall. Her sons had finally gone to sleep, but she couldn't close her eyes. Every sound made her jump. Every footstep in the hallway made her heart race. At 3 a.m., The stranger opened his eyes for the first time. They were brown, filled with confusion and pain. He tried to speak, but only a weak groan came out. Sarah quickly brought him water, helping him sip slowly. Where am I?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You're safe," Sarah replied softly. "You were hurt. I found you." He looked around the small apartment, taking in the peeling paint, the old furniture, the school bags in the corner. His eyes returned to Sarah's face, studying her with curiosity. "Why?" he asked simply. Sarah didn't know how to answer. Why had she risked everything for a complete stranger? "Because," she finally said, "someone needed help and I had hands to give it." The man closed his eyes, and Sarah thought he had fallen asleep again. But then she heard him whisper something that made her blood freeze. "My father will kill me when he finds out." The next morning brought new challenges. Sarah had missed work to stay with the stranger, which meant no pay for that day. The landlord had called twice, asking about the rent. Her sons needed money for school lunch, but the purse was empty. Michael, her older son, had been watching her struggle in silence. That morning, he approached her with determination in his young eyes. "Mama, let me drop out of school. I can work and help you pay the bills." Sarah's heart shattered. "No," she said firmly. "Education is the only thing that will save you from this life. I will find a way." But how? She had already borrowed from everyone she could. Her cleaning jobs barely covered food and basic needs. And now she had a sick stranger in her house, eating the little food they had. The stranger, who had introduced himself as James, had been conscious for most of the morning. He watched Sarah's interactions with her sons, saw the worry lines on her face, noticed how she gave them the bigger portions of food while barely eating anything herself. "I need to make some calls," James said weakly. "My family will be looking for me." Sarah hesitated. What if they're the ones who hurt you?" James was quiet for a long moment. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of," he admitted. By the third day, the landlord had had enough. He showed up at Sarah's door with two large men, demanding his money. "Sarah, I've been patient with you because of your late husband, but business is business. Pay now or get out." Sarah stood in her doorway, her sons behind her, trying to think of something to say. She had nothing. No money, no plan, nowhere to go. That's when James appeared behind her, still weak but standing. "How much does she owe?" he asked quietly. The landlord looked surprised. "Who is this? Just answer the question." 30,000 naira for this month, plus the 2 months she's behind. 90,000 total. James pulled out his phone, made a quick call, and within 10 minutes, a well-dressed man arrived with an envelope full of cash. Sarah watched in shock as her debt was paid in full, plus 6 months in advance. "Who are you?" she whispered to James as the landlord left, counting his money with a confused expression. James sat down heavily, still recovering from his injuries. "Someone who was running away from his family's money," he said quietly. "Someone who needed to remember what real people look like." But Sarah sensed there was more to the story. Much more. That evening, as they sat around her small dining table sharing a proper meal for the first time in weeks, James began to tell his story. And what he revealed would change everything Sarah thought she knew about kindness, family, and the power of one simple choice. "My name is James Okafor," he began, and Sarah's heart stopped. Everyone in Lagos knew that name. The Okafor family owned half the city's businesses, including the hotel chain where Sarah worked as a cleaner. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what James told her next. 3 days ago, I ran away from my own wedding." Sarah stared at James in disbelief. The Okafor heir had been in her tiny apartment for 3 days, and she had been feeding him with money she didn't have while his billionaire father probably had the entire city looking for him. "You ran away from your wedding?" David asked, eyes wide with curiosity. James nodded, wincing as he shifted on the couch. My father arranged it. A business deal disguised as love. The girl is nice enough, but she doesn't know me, and I don't know her. I was supposed to marry her to merge our family businesses. Michael frowned. So you just left? I drove out to think, to find courage to say no. That's when the accident happened. Or at least, I thought it was an accident. James paused, his face growing dark. Now I'm not so sure. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? The car that hit me didn't stop. It swerved directly at me, like it was meant to happen. And there's only one person who would benefit from me being out of the picture permanently. The room fell silent. Sarah's mind raced. She had saved the life of Nigeria's most eligible bachelor, but she might have also saved him from murder. Who would want to hurt you? She asked softly. James looked directly at her. My cousin Marcus. If I die, he inherits everything. The businesses, the money, the power. All of it. Sarah's world tilted. She realized she hadn't just saved a stranger. She had walked into a deadly family war between the richest people in the country. The next morning brought visitors that Sarah never expected. A convoy of black cars pulled up outside her building, causing neighbors to peer from their windows. Men in expensive suits stepped out, led by an older man with silver hair and cold eyes. Sarah opened her door to find herself face to face with Chief Okafor himself, James's father and one of the most powerful men in Nigeria. Where is my son? He demanded, pushing past her into the apartment. James appeared from the bedroom, walking slowly but with dignity. Father. The reunion was not what Sarah expected. Instead of relief or joy, Chief Okafor's face showed only anger. Do you have any idea what chaos you've caused? The wedding guests, the business deals, the embarrassment to our family name. Father, Silence. You will come home now and marry Victoria as planned. This childish rebellion ends today. Sarah watched the exchange with growing unease. She saw no love in the father's eyes, only cold calculation. And she noticed something else. Two of the men with Chief Okafor kept glancing around the apartment with suspicious eyes, as if memorizing every detail. I'm not going back, James said quietly but firmly. And I'm not marrying Victoria. Chief Okafor's face turned red with rage. You ungrateful boy. After everything I've built, everything I've given you, this is how you repay me. By wanting to choose my own life? Yes. The tension in the room was suffocating. Sarah's sons pressed closer to her, sensing danger. Very well, Chief Okafor said coldly. But know this. If you walk away from this family, you walk away from everything. No money, no name, no protection. And in our world, that can be very dangerous. The threat hung in the air like poison. Chief Okafor turned to leave, but paused at the door. And you, he said to Sarah, you've involved yourself in matters beyond your understanding. I suggest you forget you ever met my son. After they left, the apartment felt eerily quiet. Sarah realized her hands were shaking. What have I done? She whispered. James moved closer to her. You saved my life. And now I want to save yours. What do you mean? My father wasn't bluffing about the danger. If Marcus really tried to kill me, he won't stop just because I survived. And now you're connected to me. That puts you and your sons at risk. Sarah's blood ran cold. By helping James, had she put her own children in danger? That night, strange things began to happen. Sarah received anonymous phone calls with no one speaking on the other end. Someone broke into Mrs. Grace's apartment down the hall, though nothing was stolen. A car with tinted windows parked outside their building for hours. Mama, I'm scared, David admitted as they huddled together in the living room. Sarah held her sons close, her mind racing. She had thought her biggest problem was paying rent. Now she was caught in a web of family betrayal and deadly power games. James, despite his own injuries, had become protective of the family that saved him. He made calls to people he trusted, arranged for security, and insisted on staying to shield them from any danger his presence might bring. "You could leave," Sarah told him one evening. "Find somewhere safe, somewhere your family can't reach you. And leave you to face the consequences alone? Never." It was then that Sarah realized something had changed between them. What started as simple kindness had grown into something deeper. James wasn't just a stranger she had helped anymore. He had become part of their family. But their peace was shattered when Marcus himself appeared at Sarah's door 3 days later. Marcus Okafor was everything his cousin wasn't. Where James was gentle, Marcus was aggressive. Where James showed respect, Marcus displayed arrogance. "So you're the cleaning lady who's been hiding my cousin," he said with a cruel smile, pushing his way into the apartment. James appeared immediately, positioning himself between Marcus and Sarah's family. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Just checking on my dear cousin. Making sure he's recovered from his accident." The way he said the word accident made Sarah's skin crawl. "It wasn't an accident, was it?" James asked directly. Marcus's smile widened. "Accidents happen all the time in Lagos. Especially to people who make poor choices about where they stick their noses." The threat was clear. Sarah felt her sons move closer behind her. "Leave them out of this," James said firmly. "Whatever issue you have is with me." "Oh, but they're very much part of this now. You see, your little cleaning lady here has become quite famous in our circles. The poor widow who saved the rich heir. It's almost like a fairy tale." Marcus walked around the small apartment, touching things with casual disrespect. Of course, fairy tales don't always have happy endings. That's when Sarah had heard enough. Standing up to her full height, she looked Marcus directly in the eye. "Get out of my house." Marcus laughed. "Excuse me. You heard me. This is my home. You're not welcome here. Do you know who I am? I know you're a man who threatens children and women. I know you hurt your own family. And I know you're a coward who hides behind money and fear." The room went dead silent. Marcus's face twisted with rage, but before he could respond, James stepped forward. "She's right. You are a coward, Marcus. And now I have proof." James pulled out his phone, showing a recording he had been secretly making. Every threat, every admission, all of it recorded. Marcus's confidence cracked. "You can't prove anything. Can't I? Want to test that theory in court? Or should I just send this straight to the police?" For the first time, Marcus looked uncertain. After a moment of tense silence, he headed toward the door. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Yes, it is," James replied calmly. "Because I'm not running anymore. And I have people worth fighting for now." After Marcus left, Sarah sank into her chair, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "Why?" she asked James. "Why are you risking everything for us?" James sat down beside her, taking her hand gently. "Because you taught me something I had forgotten. You showed me what it means to care about someone without wanting anything in return. You saved my life, not because of who I am or what I have, but simply because I needed help." He paused, his voice growing emotional. "For the first time in my life, I understand what real family feels like. Not blood or obligation or business deals. Just people who choose to love and protect each other." Sarah looked at her sons, saw the admiration in their eyes as they looked at James. She realized he was right. They had become a family through choice, through shared struggles, through mutual care. "So what happens now?" Michael asked. James smiled. "Now we build something new. Together." 6 months later, Sarah stood in her new house, watching her sons study at the desk James had built for them. She had used her savings and James's investment to open a small catering business that was already thriving. James had kept his word. He had walked away from his father's empire but built something better with Sarah and her sons. The recorded confession had been enough to expose Marcus's crimes, sending him to prison and removing the threat from their lives. Chief Okafor had eventually come around, realizing he had lost one son to greed but could still choose to know the other. The relationship was still healing, but it was honest now. Sarah had learned that strength wasn't about enduring hardship alone. It was about opening your heart to help others, even when you had nothing to give. And sometimes, that simple act of kindness created miracles you never saw coming. As she watched James laugh with her sons over dinner, Sarah smiled. She had saved a stranger in an abandoned building 6 months ago. But the truth was, he had saved her too. Because real family isn't about blood or money or status. It's about people who choose to stand by each other, no matter what storms come. And that choice, made in love rather than obligation, is the strongest foundation of all. If this story touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below telling us what choice you would have made in Sarah's situation. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe for more real stories about the power of human kindness. Your support helps us bring you these meaningful stories. Thank you for being part of our family.